Okay, Igor, we can get underway, please.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're just waiting for the Commissioner to join us in a second.
Well, good morning. I am sitting here already in Bellamont. Just someone told me that I should stop my video.
No, please, please. Good day, Commissioner.
So I'm absolutely ready, if you are ready.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Let me just introduce you properly, Commissioner, and also the other guests today. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, welcome to the second EU Industry Week event organized by the EU Delegation to ASEAN and the EU-ASEAN Business Council. The EU Industry Days and Week are the EU's flagship event on the industrial policy. They're a vital platform for the EU policymakers to engage in a dialogue with private sector and civil society. This is why I'm glad that we continue with our partnership with EU-ASEAN Business Council to present today's event, and Donald Canuck, Chairman of the EU ABC, who will be the moderator of our panel discussion later. The webinar today touches on a key theme, the deployment and development of renewable energies in ASEAN and the role of the EU in supporting them. We will explore strengths and weaknesses of the renewable energy sector and how to step up EU and ASEAN cooperation. Just a few days ago, European and Indo-Pacific ministers met in Paris to discuss how to deepen our cooperation, including on our green agenda. Now, ASEAN plays a vital role in the Indo-Pacific, so our discussions today are particularly timely. To set the scene of our event and give us the EU perspective on the topic, we have a special guest joining us live from Brussels. I'm very honored to invite on our virtual stage the European Commissioner for Energy, Madam Kadri Simpson. Commissioner Simpson, thank you so much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning from Brussels. Ladies and gentlemen, in the EU, we want to be good ancestors to future generations, and that means grasping the opportunities now to shape a clean energy future. As you know, in the EU, we are doing that by putting sustainability and green transition at the heart of economic growth and recovery. We firmly believe in an integrated, competitive and well-functioning energy market driven by renewables and more energy efficiency. The objective is clear: net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And in Europe, we have enshrined this into EU law and are aiming for at least a 55% reduction of emissions within this decade. In practical terms, that translates into the historic legislative package we adopted last year. We propose to increase our energy efficiency and renewables targets to almost double the current share of renewables in the energy mix in just a decade by reaching at least 40% in 2030. These are our ambitions, but we know that our vision of our future cannot be built on the system of the past, so it's time to change the formula. First, boosting renewables for power production. With a rapid fall of the cost of solar PV and wind energy, it is now cheaper to install new renewable capacity than to keep running coal or gas-fired power plants in large parts of the world. And second, doing the same for heating, but also cooling industry and transport. Renewable and low-carbon fuels, including hydrogen, can be a solution for the hard-to-decarbonize sectors such as steel, cement, or heavy-duty transport. And third, providing the ideal conditions to leverage investments. Businesses and investors need a transparent, non-discriminatory, competitive and rule-based market, which provides long-term certainty. And without a level playing field, there will be no cost-efficient solutions. As the green transition requires serious investment, both the public and private sectors have to work together, and the public sector alone cannot deliver the change we need. And fourth, we want an energy system where fairness is our guiding principle. Transitions must leave no one behind. And this is why the EU has made the just transition a key pillar of the Green Deal. These assertions come from our experience. They pave our way forward in the clean energy transition. And even though geographically we are a world apart, we are still united in the challenges we face. We are very pleased to see that ASEAN countries have updated earlier goals and agreed to achieve 35% renewable energy share in installed power capacity and an energy intensity reduction target of 32% by 2025. So, even so, I really believe that your region has potential for so much more. So don't put a limit on your ambition. The possible gains for your region make any challenge worth overcoming. And I believe that the EU has already shown that you don't have to compromise on growth to choose the option for a more sustainable future. The EU and ASEAN have a long-standing relationship. 45 years has forged a strong partnership. Through this, we are providing support for the energy transition to ASEAN and its member countries. We have worked closely with you to look into the long-term strategies for climate action, and we are ready to continue as the process evolves. Similarly, on a regional level, we are working with the Secretariat to see where we could share our expertise. We hope this results in the re-establishment of a clean energy dialogue. For example, we are ready to share our experience in regional integration and the development of smart grids to integrate renewable energy sources. In December 2021, we launched the Global Gateway, the EU's connectivity strategy that will also feed into our relations with Southeast Asian countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you excellent discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Simpson, for this very inspiring intervention, and thank you for having reminded us of the numerous initiatives ongoing and the importance of international cooperation, and with ASEAN in particular, and for your call for ambition as well. We will now have the pleasure to share with you a message by Cambodia's Minister for Mines and Energy, Mr. Sui Sen, who will present to us ASEAN's priorities in this area. Thank you.
អាដាមលោកជំទាវភ្ញៀវកិត្តិយសអស់លោកលោកស្រីជាទីរាប់អានជាកិច្ចចាប់ផ្ដើមខ្ញុំពិតជាមានសេចក្តីសោមនស្សរីករាយដែលបានចូលរួមថ្លែងសន្ទរកថាបើកវេទិកាស្ដីពីអន្តរកាលធម្មពលបៃតងអាស៊ាននិងអឺរ៉ុបក្រោមប្រធានបទធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញតាមប្រព័ន្ធវីដេអូអនឡាញនិងសូមថ្លែងអំណរគុណចំពោះគំនិតរួចដើមរបស់គណៈប្រតិភូសភាពសហភាពអឺរ៉ុបប្រចាំអាស៊ាននិងក្រុមប្រឹក្សាធុរកិច្ចសហភាពអឺរ៉ុបអាស៊ានដែលបានសហការនឹងរៀបចំព្រឹត្តិការណ៍ដ៏មានសារៈសំខាន់នេះស្របតាមបរិបទនៃសកលភាវូបនីយកម្មអន្តរកាលធម្មពលបៃតងក្នុងគោលដៅធានាឲ្យបាននៅតម្លៃសមរម្យគ្រប់គ្រាន់សន្តិសុខនិងមានព្រមទាំងការចូលរួមប្រយុទ្ធប្រឆាំងនឹងការបម្រែបម្រួលអាកាសធាតុក្នុងរយៈពេលប្រមាណទសវត្សរ៍ចុងក្រោយនេះអាស៊ានអឺរ៉ុបបានបង្កើតទំនាក់ទំនងយ៉ាងនិងប្រកបដោយផ្លែផ្កាដែលផ្ដល់ផលប្រយោជន៍ឲ្យគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកនិងរួមចំណែកយ៉ាងសំខាន់ក្នុងការនាំមកនូវការអភិវឌ្ឍសេដ្ឋកិច្ចសង្គមសម្រាប់តំបន់ទាំងពីរខ្ញុំមានទំនុកចិត្តថាទំនាក់ទំនងអាស៊ានអឺរ៉ុបនឹងកាន់តែមានសារៈសំខាន់និងជាផ្លែផ្កាសម្រាប់តំបន់ទាំងពីរជាពិសេសក្នុងការពន្លឿនអន្តរកាលធម្មពលអាស៊ាននិងទីផ្សារធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញជាស្ដែងវេទិកាដ៏សំខាន់ថ្ងៃនេះក៏បានប្រមូលផ្ដុំថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំនិងអ្នកជំនាញគោលនយោបាយសំខាន់ៗក្នុងវិស័យធម្មពលមកពីបណ្ដាប្រទេសអឺរ៉ុបនិងអាស៊ានដើម្បីចែករំលែកទស្សនវិស័យបទពិសោធន៍និងចក្ខុវិស័យអន្តរកាលធម្មពលបៃតងដោយផ្ដោតលើធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញដែលយើងទាំងអស់គ្នានឹងទទួលបានចំណេះដឹងនិងគំនិតច្នៃប្រឌិតផ្សេងៗក៏ដូចជាបទពិសោធន៍ថ្មីៗ អំពីការរួមបញ្ចូលអន្តរការធម្មពលបៃតងនិងការអភិវឌ្ឍធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញដើម្បីយកមកបន្តអភិវឌ្ឍនិងដោះស្រាយបញ្ហាធម្មពលនិងការបម្រែបម្រួលអាកាសធាតុដែលយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាកំពុងជួបប្រទះបច្ចុប្បន្ននេះអាដាមលោកជំទាវអស់លោកស្រីជាការពិតបញ្ហាធម្មពលបញ្ហាអាកាសធាតុនិងបញ្ហាបរិស្ថានគឺជាបញ្ហាប្រឈមជាកញ្ចប់សម្រាប់មនុស្សជាតិនៅក្នុងសម័យកាលថ្មីនេះបរិយាកាសនេះឆ្លុះបញ្ចាំងឲ្យឃើញពីភាពចាំបាច់ក្នុងការធ្វើបដិវត្តធម្មពលឲ្យបានលឿននិងប្រកបដោយយុត្តិធម៌និងសមធម៌ដើម្បីផ្លាស់ប្ដូរពីការផលិតនិងប្រើប្រាស់ធម្មពលដែលបញ្ចេញកាបូនច្រើនទៅក្នុងបរិយាកាសឆ្ពោះទៅការផលិតនិងប្រើប្រាស់ធម្មពលស្អាតធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញនិងអនុវត្តវិធានការប្រសិទ្ធភាពធម្មពលដោយរក្សានៅការផ្គត់ផ្គង់ធម្មពលមួយដែលមានថ្លៃសមរម្យអាចជឿទុកចិត្តបាននិងមាននៅគ្រប់ទីកន្លែងទូទាំងពិភពលោករាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាបាននឹងកំពុងខិតខំប្រឹងប្រែងឥតឈប់ឈរក្នុងការអភិវឌ្ឍវិស័យធម្មពលរបស់ខ្លួនក្នុងនោះយើងបាននឹងកំពុងរៀបចំផែនការមេអភិវឌ្ឍធម្មពលសារជាថ្មីរហូតដល់ឆ្នាំ2040ដោយយើងបានតម្រង់គោលដៅបង្កើនចំណែកនៃធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញទៅក្នុងលបាយផលិតធម្មពលអគ្គិសនីនៅកម្ពុជាដល់កម្រិតអតិបរមាដោយរក្សាឲ្យបាននូវសន្តិសុខធម្មពលនិងស្ថិរភាពនៃការផ្គត់ផ្គង់ធម្មពលនៅកម្ពុជាផ្អែកលើផែនការមេថ្មីនេះដែលបានរៀបចំជាមួយនឹងធនាគារអភិវឌ្ឍអាស៊ីក្រសួងរ៉ែធម្មពលបានកំណត់គោលជំហរសំខាន់ចំនួន4ដែលពាក់ព័ន្ធទៅនឹងការពន្លឿនអន្តរការវិស័យធម្មពលឆ្ពោះទៅរកធម្មពលបៃតងដោយខាងក្រោម 1. បង្កើនការប្រើប្រាស់ធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញនិងប្រភពធម្មពលផ្សេងទៀតដែលមានគ្រោះថ្នាក់ដល់បរិស្ថានព្រមជាមួយការរៀបចំគោលនយោបាយនិងការអភិវឌ្ឍគម្រោងប្រសិទ្ធភាពធម្មពលដើម្បីចូលរួមកាត់បន្ថយការបញ្ចេញអូស្មန်ផ្ទះកញ្ចក់ទៅក្នុងបរិយាកាសទី 2. ស្មាមាត្រនៃប្រភពធម្មពលកកើតឡើងវិញនៅក្នុងប្រភពធម្មពលចម្រុះសរុបរបស់កម្ពុជានឹងមានចំនួន 59.4% នៅត្រឹមឆ្នាំ2040ហើយអង្គតង់ស៊ីតេនៃការបញ្ចេញអូស្មန်ផ្ទះកញ្ចក់ធៀបនឹងសេណារីយ៉ូចាស់ដែលធ្លាប់តាមទម្លាប់ដែលកម្ពុជាអភិវឌ្ឍពីមុនមកនឹងត្រូវបន្ថយការបញ្ចេញអូស្មန်ផ្ទះកញ្ចក់ចំនួន 34% ទី 3. មិនរៀបចំគម្រោងអភិវឌ្ឍរោងចក្រអគ្គិសនីប្រើធ្យូងថ្មថ្មីបន្ថែមទៀតនោះទេក្រោយពីគម្រោងដែលរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាបានសម្រេចរួចកាលពីឆ្នាំ2019ជាមួយគ្នានេះយើងនឹងបដូរមកប្រើប្រាស់ប្រភពធម្មពលកាបូនទាបដូចជាអូស្មန်ធម្មជាតិនាំចូលប្រភេទ LNG ឬហ៊ីដ្រូសែនជំនួសវិញ 4. បន្តលើកទឹកចិត្តចំពោះការវិនិយោគលើវិស័យធម្មពលស្អាតនិងឆ្លើយតបចំពោះការប្រែប្រួលអាកាសធាតុអាដាមអស់លោកស្រីក្នុងឱកាសនេះផងដែរខ្ញុំសូមជម្រាបជូនអង្គវិធីថាក្នុងនាមជាប្រធាននៃកិច្ចប្រជុំធម្មពលអាស៊ានលើកទី40ក្នុងឆ្នាំ2022នេះក្រសួងរ៉ែនិងធម្មពលបានកំណត់យកមូលបត្រស្តីពីការបង្កើនល្បឿនអន្តរការធម្មពលដើម្បីស្ដារសេដ្ឋកិច្ចឡើងវិញនិងកំណើនដោយចីរភាពក្នុងន័យនេះប្រទេសកម្ពុជាបដិញ្ញាបន្តជំរុញនិងពន្លឿនអន្តរការធម្មពលក្នុងតំបន់ក៏ដូចជាពង្រឹងភាពធន់នៃធម្មពលក្នុងគោលដៅឲ្យបាននៅសន្តិសុខធម្មពលមានធម្មពលប្រើប្រាស់គ្រប់គ្រាន់តម្លៃសមរម្យនិងប្រកបដោយចីរភាពសម្រាប់សហគមន៍អាស៊ានទាំងមូលដែលស្របទៅនឹងផែនការសកម្មភាពនៃកិច្ចសហប្រតិការធម្មពលអាស៊ានដំណាក់កាលទី2ឆ្នាំ2021-2025 ទន្ទឹមនេះយើងបានពិនិត្យឃើញអំពីភាពលូតលាស់នៃពាណិជ្ជកម្មធម្មពលក្នុងតំបន់ទោះបីជាបញ្ហា COVID-19 មករារាំងយើងក៏ដោយក៏វិស័យធម្មពលនេះបាននឹងកំពុងតែព្យាយាមពង្រីកវិសាលភាពរបស់ខ្លួនតាមរយៈការអភិវឌ្ឍហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធតភ្ជាប់គ្នានិងពឹងផ្អែកគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកជាពិសេសគឺការពង្រឹងកិច្ចសហប្រតិការនិងភាពជាដៃគូកាន់តែខ្លាំងដូច្នេះខ្ញុំសូមស្នើឲ្យភាគីអឺរ៉ុបបន្តគាំទ្រនិងផ្ដល់ជំនួយទាំងបច្ចេកទេសនិងហិរញ្ញវត្ថុដើម្បីជំរុញអនុវត្តផែនការសកម្មភាពនៃកិច្ចសហប្រតិការធម្មពលអាស៊ានឲ្យបាន ជោគជ័យនិងតាមផែនការដែលបានគ្រោងទុកឯកឧត្តមលោកជំទាវអស់លោកស្រីវេទិកាអន្តរកាលធម្មពលបៃតងអាស៊ានអឺរ៉ុបក្រមប្រធានបទធម្មពលកកឡើងវិញគឺជាវេទិកាដ៏មានអត្ថន័យនិងប្រមូលផ្ដុំទៅដោយពុទ្ធិថ្មីក្នុងគោលដៅលើកកម្ពស់និងជំរុញបន្ថែមសម្រាប់ការឈានទៅរកអន្តរកាលធម្មពលក្នុងតំបន់និងប្រកបដោយចីរភាពខ្ញុំសូមស្នើឲ្យអង្គវេទិកាបញ្ចេញនៅគតិបណ្ឌិតមតិយោបល់និងគំនិតដូចផ្ដើមថ្មីដើម្បីជំរុញឲ្យវេទិកានេះទទួលបាននៅលទ្ធផលជាផ្លែផ្កាហើយជាទីបញ្ចប់សូមជូនពរឲ្យវេទិកានេះប្រព្រឹត្តទៅប្រកបដោយជោគជ័យនិងសូមជូនពរឲ្យដំលោកជំទាវអស់លោកស្រីមានសុខភាពល្អបរិបូរណ៍និងទទួលបានជោគជ័យគ្រប់ភារកិច្ចសូមអរគុណ
So thank you. I will pick it up from there. I'm Don Kanak, the chairman of the EU-ASEAN Business Council, and it's my pleasure to carry on after those excellent addresses with a panel discussion from among several experts. Let me just start by thanking the commissioner and the minister for taking time to address us with those remarks and set an excellent framework for the discussion. And I thank Ambassador Igor Driesman for his partnership and various initiatives for help with the EU-ASEAN Business Council and furthering the cooperation between EU and ASEAN, and for our members, which many of whom have been present in the region for decades, if not a century. This is a very important time when European business is doing its best to try to deliver solutions and important investment and technologies and finding ways to cooperate and further ASEAN's own progress, reaching the targets that ASEAN has set. So I want to first start by thanking. Let me briefly introduce our panelists for the discussion. Thank you, Ambassador, for agreeing to also be on our panel and answer questions. I would like to introduce Dr. Ahmad Zafarullah, the Director of ASEAN Integration Monitoring Directorate of the ASEAN Secretariat, Dr. Maria Zima Bokarova, the R&D Marketing Manager for Smart Cities and Solutions, ABB Electrification, Frank Fuan, CEO Executive Director, Sunseek Group Pte Limited, Gurbuz Ganul, I hope I said your name correctly, Mr. Ganul, Director, Country Engagement and Partnerships, International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA. It's a great panel, and we've got the perspectives of both the public and the private sector from people who are deeply engaged in this question and committed to progress. Let me start, Ambassador, with you, since you are our host and organizer today, and we had from yourself and from the commissioner a mention of a number of recent initiatives or current initiatives from the EU with ASEAN, the Global Gateway, Team Europe, EU strategy for the cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. Perhaps you can take us sort of a little bit further to help us understand how those programs interact with the Green Agenda in ASEAN, how in practice they will be implemented, and will the private sector play a part in that?
Well, thank you so much, Don. My work is greatly facilitated because indeed I speak after the commissioner, but maybe a few pointers to take it a little further. You rightly mentioned the EU's strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, which really reflects the way that we try to step up our commitment in the Indo-Pacific overall. And the strategy outlines a number of areas, 7 to be precise, for strengthened cooperation, sustainable, inclusive prosperity, ocean governance, digital connectivity, security and defense, human security, but also the green transition. And ASEAN's role is important on all of these issues, but I think extremely important specifically for taking forward the green agenda. And supporting Southeast Asia's transition towards sustainability, resource efficiency, climate neutrality, I think will be decisive for reaching our globally agreed targets. And that's also what is reflected in our other strategies you mentioned, the Global Gateway, but also the EU Green Deal. So an indispensable partner for us, especially when dealing with transboundary environmental issues and for engaging simultaneously with its 10 member states. Now, for this reason, we've launched in November so-called Green Team Europe initiative, which provides a framework for coordinated environmental and climate action in partnership with ASEAN. The TEI, as we call it, because we need to give these things abbreviations, is backed by an initial 30 million euro contribution from the EU budget. And there will be more to come, much more to come from participating EU member states and indeed from the European Investment Bank. And the initiative is designed to deliver concrete results in the areas of clean energy, biodiversity and land use, circular economy, green and smart cities, as well as sustainable food systems. You're absolutely right. The private sector will play an important role in all of these areas, and mobilizing the private investment will be key for the ASEAN countries to meet their SDGs and their obligations under the Paris Agreement. So we will include in this Green TEI dialogue formats involving the private sector, trying to identify barriers for increased private sector involvement and possible solutions to them, and creating an enabling environment for your enhanced engagement. Maybe a last point. There's a major part of the ASEAN economy which consists, as you very well know, of SMEs, accounting for, what is it, between 89 and 99 of total establishments. Now we have this one specific program called Switch Asia, through which we provide support for the uptake of sustainable consumption and production practices within MSMEs in Asia, and promoting the adoption of less polluting and more resource efficient, carbon neutral products, processes, and services. So those are some of the ideas indeed which the Commissioner mentioned with maybe some more detail.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me turn from EU perspective to ASEAN perspective. Dr. Zafar, ASEAN has set an ambitious target of securing 23%, I believe, of its primary energy from renewable sources by 2025. At the same time, energy demand in the region is also going up. So that is an ambitious target to try to increase the percentage of a growing number. But there seems to be a gap in the sense it looks like at the moment we're somewhere between 13, 14%. So there's a way to go to hit that 25% target. Do you think we're on track? And if not, what's being done to overcome the challenges to the region in adopting renewables and getting on track? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Donald. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I think first I would like to thank the EU delegations to ASEAN as well as the EU-ASEAN Business Council for inviting us to this important forum. I think for us to share our perspective on the works that we are currently doing in terms of renewable energy. You have correctly pointed out that there's still a gap in terms of the ambitions, the achievement of the ambitions that, or the target that we have set for ourselves. So if you look at the statistics, we have achieved around 28.7% share in terms of total installed power capacity, but in terms of total energy mix, we are around 13.5% of renewable energy share. But then I would also like to point out that if you look at the new power capacity additions in 2020, we can see that 82% of it come from renewable energy, and then we hope that we'll be able to see even better number, which will be reported this year and the coming years. So we are slowly progressing towards our 23% aspirational target. But we have to admit that our path in the first 5 years will still leave us around 5% short by our target by 2025. And so we are cognizant of this, and that's also the reason why, if you look at the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, Phase 2, which was adopted by in the end of 2020, ASEAN has identified accelerated energy transition and enhanced energy security, which include, of course, renewable energy development as one of our priority. And then in order for us to accelerate progress, the member countries are also enhancing their respective national policy options as well as targets in order for them to be aligned with the regional targets. And if you look at all the AMS, we recently, during the COP26, you'll see that all of them have signed on to the UNFCCC as well as the Paris Agreement, and then most of them have been responding with improved ambitions, which are clearly reflected in their new NDC submissions. So those are at the national level, but then at the regional level, we can see, if you look at the recent Energy Minister meeting in September 2021, the ministers have also adopted Bandar Seri Begawan Joint Declarations, which state for the first time the explorations of a long-term target towards even lower emission energy systems. So, and then I would also like to point to the fact that ASEAN has also over the years becoming a little bit more bolder in terms of our ambitions with regard to the issues of sustainability. And then we also noticed that we have moved beyond the realm of sectoral cooperation. So we are trying to have a more holistic approach when it comes to sustainability issues. So we have introduced several initiatives to address the issue of sustainable development in a more holistic manner. For example, we have launched last year the ASEAN Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, which was designed to be an inclusive and credible classification system for sustainable activities, and will be one of the building blocks for us to attract more investment and financial flows into sustainable projects into the region. And another major important initiative that I would like to highlight is the framework for circular economy for the ASEAN Economic Community, which is also the first of its kind, which outlined a structured pathway for ASEAN to transition into circular economy and help us to achieve resource efficiency together with economic resilience and coupled with sustainable growth. And we are currently drafting the implementation plan for this framework. And then energy has been identified as one of the sectors that we will be focusing on together with the transport and agriculture. So these sectors are the one that we've found to be those sectors that are the highest carbon emitters, but also where substantial effort on sustainability and circular economy have also been made. And but then we also understand that this framework alone will not be sufficient for us to decarbonize the economy in the region. So we are also working on another document which we hope will accelerate our efforts toward decarbonization. So we are currently drafting a concept note for ASEAN strategy on carbon neutrality. And if I may also add, if you look at I mentioned earlier that we are moving beyond sector cooperations on sustainability issues. And then if you look at our trade integration initiative, the issue of labor, environment, and sustainability has becoming more and more discussed, both internally because we are currently reviewing the ASEAN trade in good agreements, and then sustainability may be one of the issues that will be discussed whether to be included in the new trade in good agreement for ASEAN. And externally also, I mean, in our engagement with our FTAs, with our dialogue partners, and then it's also in our FTA negotiations, I believe that the issue of sustainability is also another thing that has been continuously or increasingly discussed. So in sum, what I want to point out is the fact that there is the gap that we are currently facing in terms of achieving the target that we have set out for ourselves. But then at the same time, we are quite optimistic with the breadth of initiative that we are currently pursuing in order for us to push further our in order for us to enable to achieve the targets. And this can be done through regional cooperation as well as through partnership with our partners, notably the EU. And then we are glad that the EUs have come out with new initiative which will be able to support us in our endeavor in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a very comprehensive set of actions and putting sustainability into various aspects of the ASEAN program. I just one quick follow-up, as you mentioned that one thing I don't think you referred to, and I just wanted to come back to, if it's part of the program, is there anything that's nudging or moving the member states that are still subsidizing power generation based on fossil fuels and incentivizing the state-owned power companies to invest in renewable energy instead? Can you comment on that? I think there's still quite a bit of subsidy of fossil fuels that it's engaged in some of the member states. Oh, you're on mute again, sorry.
So on those issues, I think there are still room for improvement. I think the ASEAN and the AMS have put in place a lot of programs and measures to incentivize the relevant stakeholders to support their transitions to renewable energy. So if you look at the national level, we know that several AMS have introduced quite a lot of program fiscal incentive, public financing, public investments, and there were also specific programs in order for us, to encourage member states to transition towards renewable energies. But then I'm not saying that we have done enough, but then I believe that what we should be focusing on is to really look at this incentive and to see to what extent it is effective, and to what extent it still remains relevant, especially given the fact that the technology and the cost also is fast evolving in terms of renewable energy. So, and then it's also important that this initiative are well communicated to its intended beneficiaries for us to ensure that it's optimal utilization.
Thank you. Well, so let me turn to the private sector perspective for a moment. We've heard good explanation of programs from the EU and ASEAN's efforts. So let me turn to Dr. Maria and to Frank. You're in the market. You're working, trying to make this renewable energy transition a reality. Is it clear sailing, or are there some things that are holding you back or making it harder to close the gaps? Perhaps, let me start with Dr. Maria. I mean, what are real life challenges that you're facing, and maybe some practical challenges and solutions?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. There are, of course, interesting challenges, and there are, of course, interesting solutions to those challenges. Asia and South Asia region have specifics in terms of the fast development, both in well-being of people, industrialization of the economies, population growth. And let me focus on the aspects of the energy and power supply to buildings, transportation, and industries, and automation of thereof. And in that sector, what is very, of course, inspirational is to see ambitions and commitments of governments to embrace the renewable energy transition. So one of very inspiring examples is Vietnam, with the rooftop solar installations from 300 megawatts to 10 gigawatts just in a few years, and 10 gigawatts, just to give you a scale, that's peak consumption of country like Switzerland. So it's a lot of effort that we can clearly acknowledge. The challenges are similar to what we have seen in other countries, And this is simultaneously an opportunity to project the learnings that we have experienced in other regions and other countries. So we are addressing here high density urban areas with the existing infrastructure that is already under the pressure and simultaneously very rapid development. We are addressing, and we should be thinking, I believe, in the terms of the entire ecosystem. So there is a technology, there is a need for upscaling the renewable energy production. There is also the need to integrate the renewable energy production in the grids. And that affects the entire chain of the stakeholders. So it's from the designers, installers, so it's about skilled workforce. And I believe it's also about the awareness and education of the end citizens and understanding of the need for the transition to renewable energy. It's very much helpful to have a higher harmonization of the rules and stability that is reducing the risks for the project of implementation. And that gives, of course, much bigger competitiveness of the renewable energy projects. And of course, also stimulates kind of further investment into the sector. The thinking of the solution. So we do have at our fingertips the experience from the other countries. We do have modern digital technologies, and we are very happy to share, to project that we do have a number of the technical support centers that would guide, let's say, with the new design challenges, because there is a whole change of the paradigm related to the renewable energy resources. It is a different technology, and one needs to get used to and shift the skill set as well of how to address, how to deal with the renewable energy technology. We do have digital tools that are allowing, for example, remote guidance of the installers. So all of that ecosystem is at our disposal, and we can have really benefit from that and make advantage of it.
Thank you. That's great. Let me turn to Frank now. I mean, you're working primarily on the solar side of things, I believe, and so maybe just pose the same question, you know, from a practical perspective. What issues are you facing, and what are some of the key challenges and solutions?
Thank you, Donald. Usually when someone asks me this question, I always ask back, how much time do we have, right? So of course, there are many
5 minutes for the first part. We'll go deeper as we go on, but that's great. Yeah, I know you could go on for a day on this, right?
There are many challenges, right? But I think the first one I want to start off with is, of course, just like what the other panelists have talked about, policy stability, right? So in terms of the example that we brought out in Vietnam, right? So in 1 year, 9 gigawatts out of the 10 gigawatts was actually installed in 1 year. And that is a result of favorable policy towards a feed-in tariff system in Vietnam. But that was in 2020. 1 year later, 2021, while the entire solar industry in Vietnam is looking forward to the next clarification of the master plan, there wasn't any because of COVID. There was zero installation in 2021. Even in now, 2022, the entire industry in Vietnam is also looking forward to the clarification, which is hopeful to come this year. So it's very policy dependent, right? So it is really an example of, you know, policy drives the momentum of renewables take up in the country, right? Take another example in China, right? So in China, where you have presidency issuing a mandate where China wants to go a net zero by 2060. As a result, many of the state-owned enterprise in China has now embraced renewables, right? Whether or not they are part of the energy or power sector is irrelevant. They want to go green. They are off-taking themselves with utility scale projects at low IRRs. They are not looking at this in terms of profitability. They are looking at this from a mandate approach, right? Again, it is a policy driven. Then look at a country that is like Singapore. So I'm from Singapore, which is, I would say, more neutral in policy, right? 10 years ago, we started our solar journey in Singapore. I remember the first project was merely 2 megawatts. That was 10 years ago. Today, we are looking forward to 2 gigawatts. 2 gigawatts target by 2025 and 2030. We are increasing the target to 3 gigawatts. So in such a small city state like ours, we are looking forward to gigawatt installation. So again, this is the policy is favorable. Developers like ourselves can develop behind the meter solutions, in front of the meter solutions, come out of creative corporate PPA ideas, right, to spur the development of renewables. But again, Singapore being a country that's a limited area, we also look forward to other cross-border sizable projects. So these are gigawatt projects. We are working on one whereby Indonesia, we have power from Indonesia can be transmitted into Singapore. This is this one single project is 2.2 gigawatts. But obviously, this is again depending on policies, right? Again, because it's a cross-border, it needs two hands to clap. Policies between Indonesia has to be aligned to the policies in Singapore to allow for this to happen. So I guess from a certain standpoint, policies does determine the momentum of renewables. And another issue is really manpower. I guess this is already more specific to the COVID situation we are seeing in Singapore. We do suffer a manpower disruption. As a result, many of the subcontractors that we are engaged, they do not have access to foreign labor. We started, I mean, something positive came out from this actually. We started a program to train and hire 300 solar technologies in last year because we couldn't wait for the situation to be better. We wanted to take destiny into our own hands, so to speak. And then we started this hiring program and train people. So this spurs the creation of new green jobs, right? And these green jobs, now we have this concept of train the trainers, where we train the batch in July so that they will be the trainers in the batch for the batches in October, so on and so forth, right? So we believe a lot more of these solar technologies or installers will need to be trained and certified in this region. This 300 program is merely a start, like a seed to the entire manpower training for the clean energy sector. So manpower is another issue we do need to solve in Asia as well.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very, a very practical and comprehensive answer as well. I mean, bringing in the aspect of not just favorable policy, but predictable, stable policy. I mean, I didn't say at the beginning, I'm the chairman of Prudential Insurance Growth Markets, and I can say if you're in the investment side of this equation, these are very long-term investments. You need to have policy stability or some vision about the policy in order to be able to make long-term investments, whether we're talking about equity or bonds. So that's also critical, I think, for the financing side. Let me switch to Mr. Renewable. I mean, you as IRENA has done, extensive work, not just for ASEAN but across the region. I mean, across the world in developing market context. You have a lot of experience and expertise, you and the organization across, what you deliver. I mean, you've listened to public sector perspective, private sector perspective. Just interested in your thoughts on how, what tools and experience ARENA can bring to this, and how would you suggest we operationalize these advancements?
Thank you very much, Donald. Very warm greetings from Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, where IRENA is located. And many thanks to EU Delegation, to ASEAN, as well as the EU-ASEAN Business Council for inviting IRENA to this very interesting forum. And it's very interesting points raised by several speakers. So let me start by a broader context of energy transition at the global level. We have very recently published our report on World Energy Transitions Outlook, which provides a pathway for global energy transition. And it suggests an energy transition strategy, and it has to 2050, and it has several components. Obviously, renewable energy, direct supply of low-cost renewables to the power sector is one. Then there's efficiency-related aspects. There is electrification. There is the sustainable bioenergy. It's a very important component of it. And there is green hydrogen. But what is interesting among all these components is that 90% of all decarbonization solutions, they rely on renewables. So that's why renewables is in the center of energy transition. Obviously, 1.5-degree objective, it is translated into a net zero emissions by 2050. And what we have seen also in the region, several countries, they have committed to net zero. I know Vietnam, Malaysia by 2050, Indonesia by 2060, Thailand a bit later. But I mean, they have all ambition and commitment to move forward with that. And obviously, there is no time to delay it, delay the actions. Today is the time to act. And obviously, IRENA is there to help them implement actions on the ground. We have, the good news is we have a very successful institutional level collaboration framework that we have established with ASEAN. In 2018, we signed an MOU with the ASEAN Secretariat together with the 10 ministers of the region, and which provides the overall framework of engagement of IRENA in the region. And based on which we have been working at several fronts with the region. For instance, obviously, when we look at the decarbonisation of economies, there are several dimensions of it. Power sector is one. Obviously, we have now low-cost renewable energy technologies, but on the other hand, obviously, a lot of concerns raised by incumbent operators that on the one side, we put more variable renewables in the system, but how to also, we should ensure that the safe operation, secure operation of the system. So there is this, obviously, the question boils down to the fact that how we can operate our power systems more flexibly. I think this is the key issue here. It is not about having a flexible supply or flexible demand, but the entire power system flexibility, what it matters across the entire supply chain. We are working with ASEAN, we are working with Indonesia, providing this power system flexibility study. So looking into the system at the regional level, but one by one also at the country level, how integrating more variable renewables, intermittent supply affects the system, and what are the measures that you need to take in order to ensure a safe operation. Then you should go beyond power, right? It should be end-use sectors. I mean, if you don't act on end-use sectors decarbonization, net zero emissions target achievement, it is just a dream. Obviously, the direct electrification of industry and transport is extremely important. Sustainable bioenergy is extremely important. And we are working with the region also developing a sustainable biomass strategy. I think the report is coming up in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully it will provide a perspective to how this can be achieved. Obviously, then the bigger question and more popular question of green hydrogen. I think there is obviously, I mean, no one can ignore that there's a very strong political momentum around green hydrogen. Why is it important? On the one side, there are hard to abate sectors like shipping, aviation, certain industrial sectors, and electrification or other renewable energy solutions are not enough. So you need some other solution, and green hydrogen provides that solution. But on the other hand, many countries are developing it with the perspective of exporting it. I mean, when you go to Africa, North Africa, each and every country has a plan. There are around 18 global initiatives around green hydrogen right now. So there is a strong political momentum, but there is also action around that. And IRENA is very much supporting countries at the country level developing such green hydrogen strategies. We, on our side, one important dimension we always try to support the ASEAN region is how we can provide this long-term perspective based on their net zero commitments they have already. We are working at the ASEAN level renewable energy transition roadmap. And hopefully that will provide for different energy transition technologies where they can be deployed by when, and also looking into the cost and benefits of it, but also providing a socioeconomic footprint of it. So what's the impact on GDP? What's the impact on jobs? What's the impact on welfare or your trade? So these are all important dimensions. We are working with ASEAN. We are working with Indonesia as well as with Malaysia at that front, and providing them that perspective to be able to give them the actual tools and means to implement in order to achieve their own objectives.
Thank you. Well, that's terrific, and that's a great set of tools and expertise to help with ASEAN. It's good to hear you make the progress that you have. Let me build on that, then coming back to the ambassador. I mean, you've heard that's a long list of initiatives and opportunities. Just maybe come back to this question of the need to pick up the pace, so to speak, and the possible nudges that might be available to particularly move the meter in regard to the countries that are still depending and investing in expanding fossil fuels. Is there anything you could say to that as to how you think the programs of Europe or the programs that have just been discussed could maybe pick up that pace of transitioning away from the fossil fuels?
Sure. Thanks again, Don. Maybe before doing so, just zooming out slightly to the global efforts, and also picking up on what Frank Buan said about the UN framework, because I think what we've seen at the COP26 in Glasgow was a substantial step ahead, with many positive elements bringing us closer to reaching the Paris Agreement objectives. The explicit recognition that further emission reductions are needed, the commitments on adaptation, climate finance, the role of natural carbon sinks and nature-based solutions, and so on. So Glasgow has enabled significant progress, but urgent, substantial work is called for to implement those outcomes, including when it comes to updating and enhancing the nationally determined contribution to respond to the urgency. And we in Europe, we account for around only 10% of world emissions. So it is really a global effort, and implementation here remains the key word. We need real measurable efforts that countries and companies are making. Now, you asked for what can we do to take that a step further? We're, as I tried to say at the beginning, elaborating this Team Europe initiative, which has different components. And when it comes to renewable energy or clean energy specifically, we want to intensify the policy dialogue, step up the financial support, and provide technical expertise. So basically these three elements will be built into that. A nudging instrument, so to speak, is and remains climate finance. And we're advocating for internationally for a consensus and coordination on sustainable finance standards. And this is being done through multilateral fora, such as the Financial Stability Board, the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, and mainly the international platform on sustainable finance, which the EU helped establish in 2019. And that platform is currently engaging closely on two topics: in environmental taxonomies and sustainability disclosures. And from ASEAN, Singapore, Indonesia and Malaysia have joined so far, and we really hope that we will see others joining too, because that really is for us a key platform to take that important discussion forward. Don.
Thank you. That's a good list of initiatives. Let me turn over to Dr. Zafar for a question. Is how can the region ensure that the efforts from the EU, those initiatives that the ambassador just described, are put to good use? I mean, what are the priority areas from your perspective?
So the priorities areas, I think we are quite clear in terms of the areas that we want to focus on, because we have the action plan on an energy that we have developed. So, but then just allow me to share some of these areas. Clean energy through renewable energy efficiencies are obviously very important for us. But then another area that is equally important is the decarbonizations of existing fossil fuel system, and also on how we can bring the innovations and relevant technologies for us to transition towards renewable energy. But then if you look at more specifically, for the past few years, ASEAN priorities on renewable energy development include the following, which is deployments of large-scale renewable energy systems, trying to accommodate a higher share of renewable energy in the ASEAN power grid, then to increase relevant infrastructure investment, promoting smart grids for us to accelerate renewable energy deployment, and also promoting decentralized and distributed renewable energy system in order for us to address both the issue of access and scale. And then we also took note of the fact that we have all these new technologies coming in, and there will be new and advanced renewable energy technology that can be explored. And I think Irina just now mentioned some of the areas that we are currently working together with. And then also the fact that renewable energy costs are falling. So we believe that there will be better opportunity for us to for deployment of renewable energy that will greatly support our economic and sustainable development goal. So obviously that different countries or different regions or different partners organization will bring different kind of expertise, and we are willing to work across the entire range. And then given the magnitude of the work that we have in front of us, I think there's room for us to collaborate with everyone that share with the same goals. And so we therefore look forward to work with all our partners, including the EU, to advance to achieve our goal in this endeavor.
Thank you. Well, let me, I think you touched on, I've heard the word technology a lot in the last two responses. You mentioned it several times yourself. Coming back to Dr. Maria, to Frank, to Gurbuz, as we think about this, what technology, so let me start with Maria. What would you think about the question of technology? What technology solutions do you see right now that are crucial for ASEAN? And are these technologies are they already available and already here, or are there still challenges that new technologies are still needed? Can we get a lot of progress in the next 5 years, say, with existing technologies, and what's key to moving that forward?
Thank you. I like to think of technology, I like to think of engineering as a careful balance between the technology itself and the cost of the technology, and then the time as well, as Frank was mentioning, and other participants too. So I think that it cannot be decoupled from one another. Yes, we do have technology. Yes, for example, Germany investing a lot into the solar and allowing to scale the technology so it would be more affordable. This is a brilliant example. More progress can be achieved in terms of the green hydrogen production. I'm convinced about that. And probably further progress can be achieved also with the solar and wind technologies as well. Yes, technology is there. I would argue that we should look again at the entire chain and the entire ecosystem. Say, let's start with the production. We can produce electricity clean way and at good costs at this point of time. I would like us to think also about the integration of that into the grids. And that's an enormous infrastructure. Again, to put the example of Switzerland, where I'm from, the length of the grid in tiny Switzerland is enough to tide 6 times around the equator. So this is the scale of the infrastructure we're talking about. And for the grids, we do need more flexibility. We do need more insight, more observability. So we need to understand what is going on in the grids. Once we are putting more distributed energy resources, once we are shifting towards more electrified mobility for the small scale or the heavy duty vehicles, and we need to be careful about not overloading the grid connections to one another one. If we would try to match the whole grid infrastructure purely by copper, that would be enormous investment as well, back to the costs. But fortunately, we do have digitalization, and that's very frequently a much cheaper means to enhance the capability of the existing infrastructure. So if we are balancing carefully the need, for example, for charging with the need for, with the ability to produce the rooftop solar, that could be a very good synergy, and that not necessarily would require then investments in the grid. So that's one part of it. Then thinking about technology and continuing on the digitalization and thinking about the balance with the economy needs. One of the principles, and again, it's back to the careful planning. One of the principles that we pursue is the open API, so open access interfaces with the digital systems. That allows and enhances small, medium enterprises also being able to leverage the digital platforms that are existing, which are cyber secure, which are scalable, and tailor and put in the analytics that would be required, and that would be perhaps faster and more tailored to the particular conditions. So in all the technologies, there is always the point of the excellence, but there is also the point how to advance further. We can always do better. There is a need for more flexibility with the, so I mentioned production, I mentioned grids. Now we need to come to the point of the consumption. So there is also the need, and that I think goes hand in hand again with the awareness and education, but also the technology that would allow to have much more flexibility on the side of the consumption as well. Yes, battery storage is also fantastic, excellent solutions, and in many cases it might be advantages and more competitive than the others, but there is also the ability of the shift, the demand in time, and that could be also having a very big scale of the application and big impact. And in order to achieve the energy transition, we need all the components, everything. That would allow us to be more cost efficient, and that would allow us to scale and progress faster.
Thank you. That's you've just laid out the sort of chain from production to consumption, distribution, transmission in between, and you've laid it in storage. So I think you're saying, in fact, I'll paraphrase this, and I'll throw it to Frank and to Gurbuz, that in order to get the cost down to be as competitive as possible, coming back to what Minister Soysen said earlier, accessibility and affordability, you need to approach this in the full chain. And I think Frank talked about getting cross-border, and Gurbuz talked about flexibility. I shouldn't be saying this, so I'll turn it back to Frank and Gurbuz. Can you comment on that? How are we doing on that integration and the flexibility to deal with intermittence, et cetera, and bringing the cost down? Can we do that today, or what's missing from being able to do that?
Thanks, Donald. Maybe I'll comment first on this. I think cost is always something that is relative, right? Cost relative to wholesale price of what, sub 10 cents per kilowatt hour, or are we talking about cost today? I think we just have a situation in Ukraine, Russia, and therefore I think gas prices are increasing. Energy prices is scheduled to go up. So I think cost is relative, right? So traditionally, renewables has always been seen as something that is more expensive, more premium, requiring subsidies. But I think in many parts of Asia today, that is no longer the case. We are already at grid parity in most situations, right? There are some markets that continue to subsidize fossil fuels for the customers, but most of the case, we are already grid parity. Take Singapore, for example. Singapore has an open energy policy, right? Our wholesale price used to be in the range of 10 cents per kilowatt hour, right? So today it has gone up 400 times, by 400%, sorry, 4 to 5 times today, right? So energy costs are 40-50 cents per kilowatt hour today. So relative to that, I think renewable seems to be a very attractive option, right? So today we are talking about storage and solar, even halving that cost of the wholesale price that we are seeing today. So net energy cost of storage and solar coming cross-border, including all sorts of transmission and grid fees entering Singapore at roughly about 20 cents per kilowatt hour. I think that's the range that we are looking at. That cost today seems very affordable comparatively, right? Back to the question of technology, I think there are definitely a lot of focus on hydrogen, especially Singapore being a gas infrastructure hub here. We have already the infrastructure to process gas, and gas is powering 95% of what Singapore's grid is consuming today. So it makes a lot of sense of whether we can include hydrogen or green hydrogen into the mix, and eventually moving towards a full green hydrogen infrastructure in Singapore. So transferring that green electrons to green molecules, I think is a lot of work involving in that area that Singapore government is focusing on. But again, back to the, in terms of focus of technology in what segments, I think there's a lack of focus in energy consumption. I totally agree with Dr. Zima earlier, right? The comment made, energy consumption needs to be known in order to be surgical about the type of solutions to be deployed. If you don't have data of our customers on how their load profile will be like, it will be difficult to provide the correct solutions. All right, there is hardly a one-size-fits-all across the sectors, right? So what we have developed is also a smart metering solution. In fact, it's hardly called a smart metering because it doesn't require a meter. We put in an energy clamp and we use AI to desegregate loads, sub-loads for a building. In that, then we can tell the different sub-loads where it goes to, how much energy goes to lighting, how much energy goes into your power, how much power goes to your lifts, into water pumps, in your air conditioning system, etc. And with that, you will be able to tell which are the type of equipment that is faulty, that's old, that's no longer energy efficient, and then you can replace them. I think that is really, to me, a low-hanging fruit. Many parts of Asia, we are still operate of very old building systems, right? Very old equipment. I think the nature of the multi-strata title doesn't help because there's no sinking fund to replace this equipment either, right? So really, I think knowing the energy profile of our customers and then surgically being able to propose different solutions to address those energy issues, I think very important. Today, we very much don't have that kind of solutions being deployed. We talk about things like a smart nation, smart building, but rarely do we see it being implemented on a massive scale. So I really look forward to more work to be done in that sector. I think there's a lot of technology available that can allow us to do that, but it's just simply not massively being deployed. So I look forward to more of this massive deployment, and then we can address the issue more surgically. Yeah.
Let me turn this down to Gurvas. I mean, this issue of the technology is there. The question sounds like deployment, how to scale up the deployment. Do you agree with that? And where do you see what's working and what can we improve on in the region?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Donald. In fact, I mean, let me start with the costs, because I mean there are a lot said already. We have a database, a cost database that we have been collecting cost data from thousands of auction results from PPAs in a confidential manner. We collected this data and collectively presenting it every year. I think I think there's no need to say about the continuous decline in the cost of renewable energy technologies. I mean, we see it every day with PV, wind, offshore, with marine technologies, etc. But one important thing, I mean, just to give you a clear example. For instance, today, investing in a new PV power plant is less costly than running an existing coal power plant. So this is the level of competition now solar PV is offering globally. Obviously, when we talk about cost decline, there is the cost decline of solar panels, etc. But we need to look at this enabling technologies. Obviously, I mean, there's a mention of storage there. But there are storage is one of the areas where the kind of big innovation is taking place. It's not only about the innovation in the sense of technologies, but also looking into business schemes or how you administer the system. For instance, there are certain pilot projects in Northern Europe that how to use the electrical vehicles that are plugged into the system, using as storage at the time there is a need for it, and recharging the electric vehicle at the time there is less demand on the system. So there are kind of very innovative approaches that we see across countries. They're implementing these different technologies. The second question is, at the end of the day, we are all talking about the technology cost, and then which is basically more or less the same for all countries. I mean, if you get a solar PV panel from a supplier and you add in logistical cost, and then it is the cost that you receive. But then it comes the cost of money, which changes significantly from one market to another, one country to another. What is the appetite of investors to invest in that country? What is how confident they feel investing in that country? There is obviously a broader country risk, but also there is specific project-related or enabling environment-related. So that brings forward the fact that your enabling policy, regulatory environment is strong enough to attract investments. Or when you receive a bid for your auction, whether it is low enough, or there is some certain amount of premium which comes to it, and eventually which makes the price much higher. I think these are some of the considerations that we are taking forward. Obviously, in the center of energy transition, it is digitalization, it is decentralization, it is electrification, and there is a lot of innovation happening across the board. I mean, it's a technology innovation, developing innovative business schemes, innovative policies, innovative operational frameworks. And these are all complementary pieces which needs to be brought together for an effective implementation.
Right. Thank you. Let me, if I may, sorry, Maria, if you have something to add.
Yeah, if I may just, put two examples to build up on what was said. In terms of the energy efficiency, we have an example when retrofit of the ventilation and cooling system in the building allowed to achieve 40% of the energy savings, 40. We do have another calculations where we would be able to show that the vehicle to grid technology that would be allowing to essentially to decrease the power plants that would be used to back up some instances when solar power would not be available. So the vehicle to grid technology could support not only instantaneous fluctuations, but also those rare cases when we would not be able to rely on the renewable energy resources. And that shows like twice better numbers as well, comparing to putting in operation gas power plants that would need to run maybe just 100 hours a year, but however, we would need that instances of power as well.
Thank you. So an owner of an electric vehicle could potentially recover some of the cost of ownership by providing power to the grid.
Absolutely.
If we had the necessary systems in place to meter and compensate. Interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll have members from the electric vehicle industry be interested in knowing more about that. I want to shift the conversation, if I may. I have a very specific question came in from the audience. I want to pose that, I think, to Gurbuz, but not spend too much time on it, because I want to shift the conversation to this issue that I think arises whenever we're talking in a developing country context. There seems to be an understanding that there's a trade-off between making a more rapid energy transition and jobs, or between rapid energy transition and economic growth. So I want to come to that in a second, but the specific question is related to CCS or CCUS, utilization and storage, or capture and storage. Can you say anything about that from the perspective of ASEAN's plans, and is that a major focus of effort in an area which has promise?
Right. In our analysis, the world transition, energy transition outlook that I mentioned, also the one that we are now developing for ASEAN itself, obviously there will be a share for natural gas, and that would require obviously to use it by the CCUS technology. Similarly, I think the key question is also by sustainable bioenergy. Okay, when you talk about sustainable bioenergy, it has two dimensions. One dimension is interface with other sectors, with the food security, etc., at the feedstock level. And the second level is the sustainable use of bioenergy without emissions. I think in certain cases, the similar approach we are envisaging in our analysis to use bioenergy with CCUS technology. I think that will obviously have a share in the overall energy mix, but I think in an decreasing share over the years.
Thank you. Let me turn to the question of this. Is there competition between, well, first of all, I guess, Dr. Zafar, you can confirm this from the ASEAN perspective. I think there's always an ASEAN preference for a gradual transition, not just on the matter of energy, but in general, ASEAN has tried to practice keeping a harmonious movement among countries which have very different levels of development. So I think that has led to a kind of gradual approach. But in this particular case, the scientists are saying there's not much time left. The gradualism might lead to failure on everybody's part. So I think the question I wanted to pose to the whole group, really, and anybody can comment on this, is, is this a trade-off, or actually is there a complementarity between speeding up the pace of transition and creating jobs? And so I throw this open to the group. Do we have time for gradualism, or can we actually pick up the pace without harming the overall economy? Can we have a just transition and a good transition at the same time?
Just before that,
nobody volunteers.
Before that, just to respond on the questions on CCUS and CCS. So whether we are in ASEAN are currently doing anything on that. So just to follow up on Gurbuz, what Gurbuz has mentioned. So if you look at our two of our priorities for this year is actually on carbon on CCUS. One is we are trying to finalize a study on CCUS deployment framework and roadmap for ASEAN, and we expect to initiate a pilot CCUS project in the region this year. And also, which is also relevant to CCUS, is a high policy dialogue on cool and clean coal technologies. And then we have also recently launched ASEAN Center of Excellence for Clean Coal Technologies. And we are hoping that this center, together with ACE, ASEAN Center of Energy, would help us to focus on pushing the resulting roadmap that we are developing forward.
Thank you. Gurbuz, you have your hand up, your question hand up.
Yeah, let me try to give some perspectives to the question, because I really don't believe there is a trade-off between energy transition and jobs. Because first of all, I mean, let's put the facts clearly. Our analysis shows that for each $1 million spent, renewable energy creates 3 times more jobs than the fossil fuel technologies. So from that point of view, I think for future jobs, there's definitely a broader opportunities for job creation, employment creation from energy transition technologies. Obviously, the answer is not that simple. It's also about the fair and just energy transition we are talking about, right? So it has to be fair, it has to be just for everyone, not only for a certain group of privileged. So there is the question of, obviously, how you can, what are you going to do with the existing jobs? And how are you going to help transform them into renewable energy and energy transition jobs? How it is a more detailed question of competencies, and how those existing competencies with the fossil fuel technologies can be transformed into renewable energy technologies. Because, okay, there are certain technologies very specifically fossil fuels, but there are a lot of jobs which can be transformed or converted to renewable energy technologies. So there is that dimension that we need to look into. At the end of the day, you will need to see the implication of energy transition on everyone. Not everyone can be winner, but if you come up with the right socioeconomic policies and right measures, that damage that certain sectors may receive can be minimized, and effective transition can take place eventually.
Thank you. Frank, you have your hand up.
Sure. I'd like to comment on the jobs from the perspective, again, on the cross-border project that we are doing in Batam, Indonesia. So we had to put together an economic paper to the Economic Affairs Office in Indonesia to justify the rationale of doing a project in Batam, right? Because after all, we are using up area and resources in the local province such that we can generate power and pipe it to Singapore. We have to justify the rationale behind the project. So in this one project alone, I mentioned earlier, we are intending to hire roughly, or we are be creating roughly about 3,000 to 3,500 green jobs. These people will not only be hired, they will be trained and they will be certified. So this is just on the green job segment, right? Then secondly, who is going to train these 3,000 people? So part of the 300 people that we hired last year in Singapore, the plan is again, train the trainers. So we are training them now. So eventually they can be training the 3,000 people that we are expecting to hire in Indonesia. Now, on the economic side of things, so this, the area that we are building is actually on a reservoir. This reservoir is used for drinking water in Batam. And now, because of this project, we will be paying north of $10 million per year to the government in Batam to use this area. It's like an area levy that's charged on the water surface. They never had this income before. So with that, not only there is direct income, all right, to the provincial government, there's green jobs being created. We are also attracting other adjacent industries, right? Adjacent industries like, for example, your data centers, your high-tech manufacturing, your semiconductor firms. They want to set up shop and be close to where the source of the clean energy is. All right. So all this, there's this multiplier effect every time there is a green infrastructure investment. So that multiplier effect, I think, is far more than, I mean, weighing the pros and cons than the cons of some jobs that will be affected in the brown or fossil fuel in the long run. Right. That's just my view on that.
Thank you. Well, it's a viewpoint, but it's backed up by some experience of actual hiring and manpower, skills transfer and development. So that's a very important viewpoint. Maria. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. Let me touch on the access that I do observe, and I would be very interested also how, if any of the participants would have the numbers to back it up. But what came to my mind while Frank was speaking and Gurbaz was talking is that I also observe the whole shift of the thinking in the next generation that would like to live in the environment that is sustainable, that is green, and that in turn means that it's not only instantaneous health of the environment, economical environment is improving, but it's also attracting talent and in turn then economic growth for the future. So that's taking out of the, just energy landscape, but just thinking about the competitiveness of the region, speaking about the smart cities and the competitiveness of the cities between one another, and then competition in the regions, and making the whole region just more attractive for the future and for the growth.
Thank you. Well, that's a point we haven't touched on. You could call it the soft side of this, but it's very important to consider the environmental and health implications of this, and also just what kind of a environment people want to live in. So I think that's also a very important message to deliver. Let me just, if I may, quickly pose a question back to Dr. Zafar. I mean, the arguments have just come through based on some good analysis by Irina, based on actual examples that Frank referred to, that suggest there isn't a trade-off in terms of economic development. And we're in the midst of trying to recover from COVID. I mean, I know ASEAN's recovery plan, I mean, there's a lot of effort going into how do we build back better. Do you think there's more we can do, and can any of these support programs from Europe help to get messaging across that there doesn't have to be a trade-off between recovery and growth and transition? Because I don't know whether that message is really well penetrated into ASEAN as a whole.
Yes, thank you, Donald. So I personally, I also believe that ASEAN is a little bit conservative when it comes to addressing the issue of sustainability. If you look at our FTAs, or even in our ATIGA itself. So I mentioned earlier that we are currently reviewing our ATIGA, which is the ASEAN trade in good agreements. But then the issue of sustainability is obviously one of the things that ASEAN should be looking into in order for us to have a more modern kind of a trade agreements among ourselves. But then but then the message somehow was not really well received. I mean, countries are a little bit hesitant on having this issue to even be discussed. But then I think we are taking advantage of the fact that we are also engaging with our external partners. So we hope that by trying to venture into agreement with the external partners, then an additional pressure can be provided, so that member state will be able to be more or feel more comfortable in approaching these issues. On the question whether what more can be done, I think internally ASEAN is a little bit difficult, particularly due to the fact that we have this different level of development across the member states. So some member states, such as those who are a little bit more advanced, they are a little bit more comfortable, but those who are a little bit less on the development spectrum, they may find it something that is a trade-off if they were to pursue environment issues. This would necessarily be a cost for them instead of benefits that they would be able to leverage upon in the long term. So there's still a lot of work and that need to be done, especially for us to communicate strongly with those AMS which are a little bit less ready, I would say. So, but at the same time, like I mentioned, we have this different initiative at the regional level, things like the framework on circular economy for the AEC, which has been agreed by across all the member state, which in a way reflect the willingness of the member state to work toward this goal. But then at the same time, I think in those framework, we also identified the need for capacity buildings, the need for partnership, sharing of information. I mean, countries who are more advanced would have to be willing to assist. And then also leveraging on our partnership with our dialogue partners and development partners.
Thank you very much. And I think that's a good way to bring our conversation to a close. I believe we're running out of time, and I want to thank the panelists. I think we've ended on the right topic, which is the topic around how going green or becoming more sustainable in our energy isn't conflicting with the goal of development. The sustainable development has just as much emphasis on development as on sustainable, and that there is an opportunity to do both. And that opportunity comes through the cooperation of the parties that are represented on this call. Public sector, private sector, expert organizations like IRENA that are posing the way to do it and actually putting it in place. It's a complicated issue from technology to manpower, but I think we've had a good coverage of the ingredients today. And I'm optimistic that with the programs outlined that Igor talked about earlier, that the EU can make a contribution to pushing this along, and it will end up being to the benefit of the citizens of ASEAN. So with all that, let me thank the panelists and again, thank our speakers at the beginning. Let me turn it over to Chris Humphrey, who I think has a brief announcement about the next program from the EU-ASEAN Business Council.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Thank you to all our panelists, especially a big thanks to Igor and his team who helped us pull this one together today as part of the EU Industry Days activities. Just a very quick announcement. We do actually have another webinar coming up next week on the issue of sustainability in Southeast Asia, and the point that Dr. Sahar was just making about circular economy indeed. It's on extended producer responsibility in the region. You can see it on your screen. If you're watching now, please scan the QR code. You can register for it and join us for it next week. And with that, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today, this morning, if you're in Europe, this afternoon, if you're in Asia. Many thanks again to all of our panelists today, and keep safe, keep well, and we hope you can join us next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody.